wasn't immediate that official diplomatic relations were finally established. It wasn't until 79 under Carter. What did it take for this to actually happen?
Basically, it took the return of political stability and authority in Washington and Beijing. In Washington, Jimmy Carter was elected and was firmly in charge of the government. In China, after the confusion of the Gang of Four and their arrest, and a brief period under Hua Guofeng, Deng Xiaoping took the reins. And in 1978, the Carter administration, concerned about Soviet activity and advised by a very anti-Soviet Polish nationalist, Zbigniew Brzezinski, accelerated the effort to normalize with China. On the Chinese side, Deng Xiaoping had two reasons to want to move toward normalization. One was, of course, that the Soviet Union and Vietnam were colluding in what looked to China like an effort at encircling it from the south as well as from the north. And China felt it needed to dissuade Vietnam from continuing to build its own Soviet-backed empire in Indochina. So Deng Xiaoping had the idea that he would give Hanoi a lesson, perhaps a whole curriculum of lessons, using force. And he wanted the appearance of American backing, and normalization provided that. But the second and far more important reason, which we really didn't appreciate at the time, was that he had decided in many respects to dismantle the elements of the Soviet system and Mao's innovations in China and move to join the rest of the world, to adopt market economics, to look at best practices international and adapt them to Chinese realities. And so at the third plenum of the 11th Party Congress in December 1978, he pursued both these objectives: approval for war with Vietnam and approval of normalization with the United States. And beginning in 1979, he actually went to war with Vietnam, which worked. That is to say, despite a much higher military cost than he had anticipated, the war revealed many weaknesses in the People's Liberation Army. And the Vietnamese, of course, at that time were with no doubt, I would say they were the world's best infantry. So they gave the Chinese a really hard time. But the political objective of dissuading Vietnam from continued reliance on the Soviet Union and empire building was achieved. Of course, with the United States, Deng, after normalization, sent the children of the Chinese elite to be educated in the United States. And in many ways, the two societies converged economically, although not politically. China never offered to or was interested in changing its political system. What it was interested in was modernizing its society and economy within the parameters of Communist Party rule. So that is exactly what Deng set off. And in the succeeding 40 years, China registered astounding progress in both its economy and in its social openness.
To start off normalization and official relations, Deng Xiaoping visited the U.S. Can you touch on the planning, significance, and reception of that trip?
Deng's visit was essential for both the purposes that I mentioned. That is, to give the appearance of an American endorsement of his actions against Vietnam that would keep the Soviet Union off balance, and also to start the opening of normal ties between Washington and Beijing. It was also a public relations triumph. Here was this little man who put a cowboy hat on in Texas. And some of his blunt charm and ability to cut through the crap and go directly to the essence of problems was observed by Americans. And he became a rock star in our media. And that really helped to consolidate normalization, which was, of course, being attacked by proponents of ties with Taiwan at the time. So the preparations for Deng's visit included, of course, the logistics, the management of the visit. But they also included two other things. The beginning of a process of reaching agreement on foundational documents, treaties, agreements, executive agreements, programmatic memoranda that would produce the kind of normal relationship the two countries might have had if we had not had 3 decades of estrangement. The second element of it was to manage the abnormalization of relations with Taiwan, meaning to keep the substance of our ties while giving up the formal aspects of them, the official aspects of them. Taipei sent a brilliant diplomat here to negotiate, and he actually ended up getting much more for Taiwan than anybody had been prepared to yield on the American side. But of course, it wasn't enough for people in Taipei, and he was roundly castigated for having failed. In the end, diplomats have a major unfortunate utility in that we're often most valuable as scapegoats when it's discovered that aspirations are unrealistic and cannot be realized.